Every 40 seconds, someone somewhere in the world has a stroke. By the time you finish watching the next 60 seconds of this video, 3 more people will have had one. Nearly 12 million strokes happen every year. 6.5 million of those people do not survive. And for the ones who do, many wake up unable to speak, unable to move, or unable to recognize the faces of the people they love most. Here's the part that should stop you cold. In a huge number of those cases, the brain had already tried to warn them. Hours before, sometimes days before. It sent out signals that were so clear, so specific, so undeniable that if those people had known what they were looking at, everything could have changed. They did not know. And that is exactly why you are watching this video right now. We are going to go through what those warnings actually look like, why they happen, what is physically going on inside your body when they show up, and what you need to do the moment you notice one. We are also going to talk about the hidden damage that builds up in your blood vessels for years before any of this ever happens, and why the things you do or do not do today are quietly writing the story of what your brain will do 10 years from now. Stick with me all the way through because the most important part of this is not just knowing the warning signs. It is understanding what to do in the 72 hours after one shows up. That window is real, and most people waste it completely. The slow fire you cannot feel. Before we get to the warning signs themselves, you need to understand something that almost nobody talks about clearly enough. A stroke does not start the moment you fall down. It starts years earlier in the walls of your blood vessels, building quietly, causing zero pain, showing up in no obvious way while your life goes on completely normally. That is what makes it so dangerous. And that is also what makes it so preventable if you catch it in time. Here's the best way to think about it. Your arteries, the tubes that carry blood from your heart to every part of your body, including your brain, are not simple hollow pipes. The inside surface of every artery is lined with a very thin layer of cells. Think of it like the non-stick coating on a frying pan. When that coating is smooth and healthy, nothing sticks. Blood slides through easily, clots do not form, and everything flows the way it is supposed to. But when that lining gets damaged, it becomes rough, scratched, and just like a scratched up pan where everything starts to burn and stick, your artery walls start to collect things they are not supposed to collect. Fat, cholesterol, tiny blood cells that clump together, inflammatory junk that your immune system leaves behind. Over time, all of that stuff piles up and hardens into what doctors call plaque. Now here's where it gets really interesting. That plaque does not grow evenly. It lumps up in certain spots, especially at places where arteries branch. And as it grows, it does two things that are both very bad. First, it makes the opening inside the artery narrower and narrower, like someone slowly pinching a garden hose. Second, it makes the walls of the artery stiffer and more fragile, less able to flex, less able to handle changes in pressure. For years, maybe decades, you feel nothing. Your artery might already be narrowed by 40 or 50%, and you would have no idea. Blood still gets through. Not perfectly, but enough. Then something shifts. Maybe a piece of that plaque breaks off. Maybe a tiny clot forms right on top of it. Maybe your blood pressure spikes. Maybe you sleep in a position that changes the blood flow in your neck. And suddenly the blood that was barely squeezing through that narrowed artery stops. The part of the brain that depended on that blood supply goes dark, and what happens next depends entirely on how long it stays dark. If it comes back in a few minutes, you get a warning, a transient attack, a brief message from your brain that says something is very wrong. If it does not come back, brain cells start dying in 4 to 6 minutes. And once brain cells die, they do not come back. That is the stroke. So everything before that moment, everything in the years of slow vessel damage, and especially everything in the hours and days before the big event, that is where lives can be saved. That is your window, and the window is wide open right now. The biggest villain in this story, the thing that does the most quiet damage to that inner lining of your arteries over time, is not necessarily the thing most people think of. Yes, smoking attacks the vessel walls directly with thousands of toxic chemicals and makes the blood thicker and stickier so clots form more easily. Studies consistently show that smokers face 2 to 4 times the stroke risk of non-smokers, even when blood pressure and cholesterol look similar. Yes, high blood pressure physically hammers the walls of your arteries year after year with more force than they were designed to handle. But the silent heavyweight, the one that most people do not take seriously enough until it is too late, is blood sugar. When blood sugar is high for long periods of time, the cells that make up that inner lining of your arteries literally start to starve. That sounds backwards because there is plenty of sugar in the blood, but those lining cells need a hormone called insulin to actually pull the sugar in and use it as fuel. When insulin stops working properly, which is exactly what happens in prediabetes and diabetes, those cells cannot get the fuel they need even when it is floating right outside their door. Starving cells get damaged. They lose their shape. They pull away from each other, and the surface that was once smooth and non-stick becomes rough and sticky and inflamed. This process starts long before anyone officially tells you that you have a problem. The gray zone, called prediabetes, where your blood sugar is elevated but not quite high enough to officially qualify as diabetes, is enough to quietly damage your vessel walls for years. And the troubling part is that most people in that gray zone have no symptoms. No warning lights, no alarm bells, just a number on a blood test that might be slightly off from normal. Easy to ignore, easy to put off dealing with until later. Later has a way of becoming too late. The other thing worth knowing about blood pressure is that it is not just high blood pressure that causes strokes. There is a twist that catches people off guard. If your artery is already significantly narrowed by plaque, your body needs a certain amount of pressure in the system to keep blood moving through that tight spot. It is like water trying to squeeze through a crimped hose. You need enough pressure from behind to push it through. When blood pressure drops, even temporarily, that already limited flow can fall to almost zero. And blood pressure drops naturally every night while you sleep. It can dip by 15 to 20% in a healthy person during sleep. For someone with a badly narrowed artery and a small clot sitting on top of a plaque, that nighttime drop can be the difference between barely getting through and not getting through at all. That is why so many strokes happen in the early morning hours. People go to bed feeling fine. They wake up or someone finds them with symptoms. The damage happened quietly in the dark while they slept. What your brain actually looks like. When the warning comes now, let us talk about the 5 warnings, the ones your brain sends before the main event. And let us be very clear about something first. These warnings are not subtle. They are not vague feelings of being off or tired or stressed. They are specific, unusual, sometimes terrifying events that last anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes and then disappear completely, which is exactly why people talk themselves out of taking them seriously. Do not make that mistake. The first warning is a sudden blackout in one eye. You are walking across a room, reaching for something, standing in a conversation, and without any warning at all, one eye goes dark. Not blurry, not dim. Dark. Some people describe it as a black curtain being pulled down from the top of their vision in that eye. Others say it was like someone smeared gray mud across the lens. It lasts maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Then it clears. And you think, that was weird, and move on. What just happened inside your body is this. A tiny fragment of plaque or a small clot broke off from the wall of a narrowed artery in your neck. That fragment traveled up through the blood and lodged inside the very small artery that feeds your eye, cutting off blood supply to the tissue that processes light. For that brief moment, your eye could not receive enough blood to function, and it went dark. Here is the part that should genuinely scare you. The artery to your eye is not a random, isolated tube. It is a direct branch of the main artery that also feeds your brain. That clot fragment went to your eye instead of your brain. The difference between those two destinations might be 2 millimeters of distance. If it had drifted slightly differently instead of a 1-minute blackout in one eye, you would be looking at permanent loss of speech, paralysis of one side of your body, or death. Doctors have a specific term for this one-eye blackout. They treat it like a fire alarm going off. Hospital records show a pattern again and again, where patients describe having had 1 or 2 of these brief vision episodes in the weeks or months before a major stroke. and having told no one or having been told not to worry about it. That window where it could have been stopped closes a little more each time. The second warning is sudden numbness or tingling on one side of your body. You are sitting still, not in an unusual position, and out of nowhere, one hand goes to pins and needles, or half your face feels like it fell asleep, or the whole left side of your body, arm, leg, face, feels like it is wrapped in cotton. Not both sides. One side. And then 5 minutes later it is gone, as if nothing happened. People often assume they slept on the arm funny or sat in a bad position or cut off circulation somehow. The key difference is this. When you squeeze a nerve or sit on your leg for too long, the numbness comes on gradually and it is tied to a position. The moment you move, it starts to clear. With a vascular warning, the numbness arrives instantly, with no position change, no nerve pressure, no obvious cause. It is your brain's sensory area for that side of your body, momentarily losing its blood supply. The one-sided nature of it is also a major clue. Each side of your brain controls sensation for the opposite side of your body. So when both hands go numb at once, that points more toward a neck issue or a circulation issue elsewhere. But when only one side is affected, suddenly, and then it resolves on its own, that is the pattern that neurologists flag as a possible mini-warning stroke. The third warning is loss of coordination, a drunk walk with zero alcohol involved. You are on a completely flat, familiar surface. Your kitchen floor, your hallway, the pavement outside your front door, and without any stumble, any trip, anything to grab on, you stagger sideways. Your foot lands in the wrong place. You grab the wall. The room spins hard enough that you have to sit down, even though you did not move your head quickly, did not stand up fast, have no known inner ear condition. The part of your brain responsible for balance and smooth movement is called the cerebellum. It sits in the back and lower part of your skull. It runs continuously in the background, constantly calculating where each part of your body is in space and telling your muscles exactly how hard to fire so that you walk in a straight line, reach accurately, stay upright. It does this thousands of times per second without you ever being aware of it. The arteries that feed the cerebellum run up through the bones in your neck. When blood flow to the cerebellum drops, even briefly, it essentially glitches. And when the cerebellum glitches, your body lurches. You veer, you spin. You feel like the ground tilted when it absolutely did not. People frequently blame episodes like this on tiredness, blood pressure, bad shoes, or inner ear trouble. And sometimes those explanations are right. But the key question is whether the dizziness or loss of balance arrived suddenly without the usual triggers and resolved on its own. If so, it needs to be taken seriously as a possible vascular warning, not shrugged off as a dizzy spell. The fourth warning hits your speech, and this one is often the most frightening for the people who experience it. You are mid-conversation, and suddenly the words will not come out right. You know exactly what you want to say. The thought is completely formed in your mind. But when you try to speak, what comes out is slurred, garbled, choppy, or just stuck. Or the opposite happens. Words come out quickly and fluently, but they are scrambled nonsense. A word salad that makes no sense to you or anyone listening, and you cannot quite understand what other people are saying to you either. Both of these are speech warnings. Two different areas in the brain handle different aspects of speech. One area controls the physical act of forming words, coordinating your tongue, lips, jaw, and breath to produce speech sounds. The other area handles the organization of language itself, putting words in the right order, choosing the right words, understanding speech that comes in. When either of those areas loses blood supply, even briefly, speech breaks down in different ways. The thing that trips people up is the brief duration. Because it resolves so quickly, people conclude they were just tired, or their mind went blank, or they had a brain freeze. They do not mention it to anyone, and this is an enormous mistake. A sudden speech breakdown that self-corrects in a few minutes is still a warning. The brain is still sending the same message. Your home alarm going off and then stopping on its own does not mean nothing happened. It means something triggered it. The fifth warning is a combination that most people would never connect to stroke risk on their own. Certain skin changes paired with a new pattern of unusually intense headaches. The skin condition here is vitiligo, which appears as patches of pale or completely white skin where the cells that produce skin color have stopped working. Vitiligo is an autoimmune condition. This means the immune system, for reasons researchers are still working to fully understand, begins attacking its own tissue as if it were a foreign invader. In this case, it attacks pigment-producing cells in the skin. Here is why that matters for your brain. When an immune system goes off course like that, it often does not limit its attack to just one tissue. That same inflammation and autoimmune activity can quietly affect the inner lining of blood vessel walls over time. And as we talked about earlier, a damaged vessel lining is exactly where plaques form, where clots attach, and where the slow process of narrowing begins. Vitiligo by itself does not guarantee anything. Millions of people have vitiligo and never have a stroke. But when vitiligo shows up in combination with a new pattern of headaches that feel different from anything you have experienced before, more intense in a different location, arriving more frequently, that combination is worth discussing with a doctor rather than waiting to see how it develops. Headaches in general are tricky because they come from so many different places. A very common cause of regular headaches that people often blame on their circulation is actually wear and tear in the small joints of the upper neck vertebrae. That degeneration irritates nerves that run up into the scalp and face, producing head pain that has nothing to do with blood vessel blockage. Neck disc problems can also send pain into the head and arms. But when your headache pattern changes in a noticeable way, especially alongside any of the other 4 warning signs we just covered, that change in pattern is the part that deserves medical attention. The 72-hour window that most people waste here is the honest truth about what happens after a warning episode. Most people do nothing. The symptom went away. They feel fine now. They decide they will mention it at their next checkup, which might be 4 months away. Or they mention it to a family member who also agrees it was probably nothing. And life goes on. Meanwhile, researchers tracking these patterns have found that nearly 1 in 5 people who experience a warning episode will have a full stroke within 90 days. And the highest risk period is not 3 months out. It is within the first 48 hours. The window where the most damage can be prevented is also the window where people are most likely to convince themselves everything is fine. So what do you actually do? First, do not be alone. After a warning episode, having someone with you matters. Not because you need someone to hold your hand, but because if a more serious episode happens and you suddenly cannot speak or cannot move one side of your body, you need another person to see it happen, call for help, and get emergency services to you quickly. This is especially important if you live alone. It is worth calling someone you trust, telling them what happened, and staying accessible for the next couple of days. Second, do not drive. This is a rule in stroke medicine, not a suggestion. If a warning episode happens while you are operating a vehicle, even a brief loss of vision in one eye or a sudden loss of coordination, the consequences extend well beyond you. Making arrangements for someone else to transport you or using another option entirely is the right call. Third, know your blood pressure numbers. If you have a way to check your blood pressure and the top number is around 180 or higher, while the bottom number is around 110 or higher, that is a hypertensive crisis, not just slightly elevated blood pressure. A crisis like that alongside other warning signs is a situation that most stroke guidelines describe as requiring emergency care, not a wait-and-see approach. Fourth, do not self-medicate with blood thinners. This is extremely important and worth spending a moment on. There are 2 completely different types of stroke. One happens when a blood vessel is blocked and no blood gets through. The other happens when a blood vessel bursts and blood floods into the brain. These 2 situations require completely opposite responses. Blood thinning medication can be helpful in certain blocked vessel situations, but in a burst vessel situation, it actively makes things worse and faster and more lethal. There is no way to tell which type is happening without a brain scan. No doctor can determine that just by looking at someone. So taking aspirin or any blood thinner based on something you read or something a friend suggested without confirmed medical direction is a genuine gamble with your life. Fifth, body position matters while you wait for care. Lying flat with your legs slightly elevated tends to support blood flow to the brain better than sitting bolt upright. Keep your head in a neutral position, not bent sharply forward or thrown back. Avoid heat, alcohol, or anything that causes blood vessels to dilate rapidly, because in an already unstable circulation, sudden vessel widening can make things worse. And sixth, keep a written list of every medication you take regularly, not in your phone where it might need a password and fingerprint to unlock, on a piece of paper somewhere accessible. This small thing saves emergency teams real time and helps them make faster decisions. Now, after those immediate steps, there are 3 tests worth asking your doctor about explicitly, not eventually, at your next visit or sooner if symptoms were recent. The first is an ultrasound of your neck arteries. Unlike a standard ultrasound that just shows structure, the version used here shows both the shape of the artery and how blood is actually moving through it. It can detect turbulent or sluggish flow at a narrowed point, even before that narrowing is severe enough to show up clearly on other scans. If narrowing is found to be significant, the conversation changes from general prevention advice to a much more specific discussion about options that might include a procedure to remove the plaque directly. That procedure is performed routinely and successfully in hospitals around the world. The second is a blood test that shows your average blood sugar over the past 3 months, not just a single snapshot. This test measures how much of a specific protein in your red blood cells has had sugar stuck to it over time. The higher your blood sugar has been over those months, the more of that protein will be sugar-coated. You cannot fool this test with one careful day of eating before the blood draw. It tells the truth about what has been happening in your body for the past 3 months. And it catches that pre-diabetes gray zone, the zone where vessel damage is already underway, but no one has officially given it a label yet. The third is a 24-hour heart rhythm recording. You wear a small device for a full day while going about your normal life, and it records your heart rhythm the entire time. The reason a full day matters is that one of the most significant hidden causes of stroke, an irregular heart rhythm where the upper chambers of the heart quiver chaotically instead of beating in a steady, organized way, often comes and goes. A short recording in a clinic might completely miss it if it does not happen to occur in that 10-second window. When the upper chambers of the heart quiver like that, blood does not flow smoothly. It churns and swirls inside those chambers instead of moving forward efficiently. In swirling blood, clots form easily, and when those clots get ejected from the heart, they travel straight to the brain. Strokes caused this way tend to be among the most severe. The good news is that when this heart rhythm problem is diagnosed, there are well-studied medications that can cut the stroke risk it causes by 60 to 70%. That is not an inevitable outcome. That is a risk you and a doctor can actively do something about. The things you can start doing today. Here's where we pull everything together. Stroke is not random. It is not a bolt from nowhere. For most people, it is the last step of a long process that started years earlier, that built slowly and quietly, and that sent out very specific warning signals before it arrived. If that process is running in your body right now, there is a real chance you can interrupt it. The single most powerful thing for your blood vessel health is keeping blood sugar in a healthy range. This is not just about avoiding diagnosed diabetes. It is about catching the earlier stages, the gray zone, before vessel damage has accumulated for too long. Getting your 3-month blood sugar tested, knowing your numbers, and making changes with your doctor's guidance while there's still plenty of time to reverse course, that is one of the most direct investments you can make in your brain's future. Managing blood pressure is not about pushing it as low as possible. It is about avoiding both extremes. Both chronically high pressure that hammers and weakens vessel walls over years, and overly aggressive lowering in a person who already has significantly narrowed arteries come with their own risks. This is a conversation worth having with your doctor with actual numbers in hand, not a general reassurance that everything looks fine. If you smoke, every cigarette is a chemical attack on the inner lining of your blood vessels. It is also making your blood thicker and stickier in a way that dramatically increases clotting risk. Stopping smoking, even with support and medication to make it more manageable, cuts ischemic stroke risk by a factor of 2 to 4 over time. That is not a small number. That is one of the most impactful single changes a person can make for their vascular health. And across all of this, the most important single shift in how you think about this. Stop assuming that brief, strange symptoms that go away on their own were probably nothing. The brain does not send false alarms. When it sends a warning, it is describing something real that happened inside your blood vessels. The fact that the symptom resolved does not mean the underlying cause resolved. The artery is still narrowed, the plaque is still there, the clot risk is still elevated. You are just in the window where something can still be done. That window is 72 hours. Use it. If anything in this video matched something you have already experienced, even weeks or months ago, write it down in plain language and bring it to your next medical appointment. Do not rely on memory. Do not assume your doctor already knows. Ask directly whether what you experienced could have been a warning episode and whether the neck ultrasound, the 3-month blood sugar test, or the 24-hour heart rhythm recording would make sense in your situation. Everything covered here is meant to help you have a smarter conversation with your doctor, not to replace that conversation. Your specific history, your numbers, your risk factors, they all matter in ways a video cannot account for. But walking into your next appointment, knowing what questions to ask is already a completely different situation from walking in and waiting to be told everything looks fine. Your brain has been keeping you alive your entire life, every second of every day, running every thought and movement and memory and breath without ever asking for a break. It deserves the chance to give you a warning when something is wrong, and you deserve to know what that warning looks like. If this gave you something real to think about, hit like and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. Ring the notification bell if you want these videos to actually show up for you, because the algorithm does not always make that easy. I want to know, was there anything in here that you had experienced before but never connected to stroke risk? Drop it in the comments. You might help someone else realize they are not alone in having missed it. And if you want to go deeper on how your heart rhythm secretly drives your stroke risk, that video is waiting for you right now.